being. Alright, so in today's video, I'm going to show you the timeline of Yeshua's Crucifixion week. So up here on this chalkboard, I don't know how well you can see it, there are 24-hour days, or 24-hour days in the Hebrew calendar, in God's calendar. They start at sunset the day before. So the 13th day, when sunset comes, when the sun goes down, it automatically starts the 14th day of the next day. In John 11:9, Yeshua himself says that aren't there 12 hours in a daylight? And in Matthew 12:40, Yeshua tells us that no sign will be given them except the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So, with that, over there, let's go to this whiteboard here. Now, as I said, the next day starts at night. So we've got Sunday, I've got a calendar up here, Sunday through Saturday, and it shows night and day. So the night is the line, the day is the squares, okay? So let's turn the Bible. Let's go to John chapter 12. It says, 6 days before the Passover, Yeshua arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Yeshua had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Yeshua's honor. Martha served, as Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Yeshua's feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So, at this time when Yeshua is being anointed while at Mary and Martha's house, this is 6 days before Passover. Now, we count off, I know a lot of people want to start with Good Friday, and they think the whole Palm Sunday is on Sunday, but I'm not sure where I should start, so I'm going to go ahead and start here the way I believe it is shown, and as I go, maybe you'll see why I believe that there is no Palm Sunday, and it's actually earlier in the week than that, and how Yeshua didn't rise on Sunday, but rose on Saturday instead. So, 6 days before Passover. Passover, as I showed in one of my other videos, is the 14th day in the evening. So between noon and 6 o'clock, when it's noon, the sun's up like this and it starts going back down, that starts the evening. And at 6 o'clock, it's sunset. So that was between the evenings when they would sacrifice the lambs for Passover. And so that's when Yeshua had died. Now, 6 days prior to that would be the 13th, 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th. So at 8th, he's on the 8th of Nisan, Aviv. He is, and remember, this is not the Gregorian calendar that we use today. This is on God's calendar. The Hebrew month called Aviv, or some call it Nisan. So on the 8th day, Yeshua is at Mary and Martha's house. And then the following day, now that's the book of John. John talks about him being at Mary and Martha's house on the 8th day, on the 8th day of Nisan, Aviv, 6 days prior to Passover. Matthew, Mark, Luke do not talk about that. They do not mention him being at Mary and Martha's house. They actually mention him being in Jericho the day before the day before he rides in on the donkey. We'll put it that way. So let me grab my notes here. I wrote this out for a timeline. So Yeshua was at the temple let's see. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay. So Yeshua was at the temple. Matthew 21, verse 12 is the ninth at sunset. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell about how Yeshua went on this day here, Friday, which would be our Friday, and it would be the ninth during the day. He went to Jericho. And on his way back, or while he was there, he talked to Zacchaeus. And you know the story about Zacchaeus being up in the tree to see Yeshua. And anyway, Yeshua's giving all these parables while he's there. And then on his way back, he tells his disciples to go into town and get a donkey and the colt, the donkey and the donkey's baby. And so they bring it to Yeshua. And he rides in to Jerusalem. And this is Friday evening, the 9th. So they're taking in, this is about sunset time. And like I said in the other video, in Passover, when you're preparing Passover, you take in the lamb on the 10th day of the month of Aviv. And you keep that lamb the 10th for 5 days. The 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th. Where you sacrifice the lamb at the end of the 14th. So right here, they're taking in their lamb, Yeshua. They're throwing down their coats on the ground, and they're waving their palm branches and singing Hosanna in the highest. Right here, it's around sunset. They're taking in their lamb. And now, here's the part that starts getting a little awkward a little bit with, I guess you'd say, kind of contradictory a little bit with Matthew, Mark, and Luke's Gospels, because whenever Yeshua gets done riding into town on the donkey, Matthew says that Yeshua goes into the temple and he's overturning the tables. Matthew 21:12, it says that he says that's on that same night that he's riding in on the donkey. That night, he's turning over the tables in the. And Luke says the same thing. He's turning over the tables in the temple, and says, "You made my father's house a den of robbers." And Mark says after that he was teaching in the temple, and then he went back home, or not back home. He went back to Bethany and stayed at Mary and Martha's house for the night, and then he went back to the temple in Jerusalem on the 10th day. And now in this same area we have the fig tree that withers, because Yeshua curses it because it didn't have any fruit to provide for him. Now Matthew says that was on the following day, the 10th day, so that morning. And Luke says that was on the next morning afterward, the 11th, because according to Luke, he was at the temple, turning over tables and teaching, and then got late and went home, or went wherever he went, it doesn't say. And then he came the next morning, the 11th, and found the fig tree and he withered it, or made it wither. Did I say Luke? Because I meant Mark if I said Luke. I believe I said Luke. Luke doesn't mention about the fig tree. And then there's just 8 different things that I wrote down on here. The authority of Yeshua was questioned. So, like I said, the 10th, you got to bring in that lamb on the 10th day of the month, and you've got to test it. You got to check it over, make sure it's all good, make sure it's a pure lamb. And so that's what they did. The Pharisees and Sadducees, teachers of the law, the scribes, they all tested Yeshua. So, according to Matthew, they tested Yeshua this day, the 10th, on through the 14th. And then, according to Mark, they questioned him on the 11th According to Luke, it was either the 10th or the 11th. And then we've got where Yeshua gives his end of the age sermon. His sermon on, I don't know if they call that the Sermon on the Mount or if that's the whole Beatitudes. I forget now. But
Beatitudes.
So he gives a sermon about the end of the age. And in Matthew, the book of Matthew, he says it shows that it gives it on this day here, the 10th. And in Mark, it was on the 12th. And in Luke, it was also on the 12th. And then Yeshua sends his disciple to prepare the Passover. That was on the 13th. It was the following day. And that's in both Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then here is where John, in the book of John, catches up because it doesn't speak anymore. Let's see. Let's go to the book of John here. Okay, the book of John tells about his riding into town on the donkey, and it doesn't give much more about that until this day here, the 13th. That's where John picks up. They all line up on the 13th. So, right here, Yeshua tells his disciples to prepare the Passover. And when it says, in each of those books, it says, when evening came, sunset here, he came in and reclined at the dinner table with them. It also says in a couple of the books, in the Gospels, that it says he's washing their feet. And so that will take place overnight, and then they sing the Hallel scriptures and Psalms, and they're singing those, and they're on the way, and Yeshua's praying, and they're on the way to the Garden of Gethsemane, or Mount, it's the Garden of Gethsemane. I always get the Garden of Gethsemane and Mount of Olives mixed up, but I think they're actually the same thing in the right area, same area of one.
Yeah, we went to Mount of Olives.
So the Garden of Gethsemane on Mount of Olives, and this is overnight, in the middle of the night. It's about midnight when they're doing this, and Yeshua, he goes and prays, and that's all right. So Yeshua is praying, and Judas comes with the Roman soldiers, and they come and arrest Yeshua, and they question him. And they put him on the stake that day, that morning. I think it said from the 6th hour, or no, from the 3rd hour to the 6th hour, if I remember correctly. It's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Somewhere in that time. I looked it up, but since I've forgotten. So what they call this day is Preparation Day. The 14th day of the month is called Preparation Day. And it is known as Preparation Day. It's called Passover. And like I said before, Passover is just a moment in time. It's this time right here, Passover. They sacrifice their lamb for Passover. And so Yeshua was put on the stake, and he died at 3 p.m. He said, "It is finished," and he gave up his ghost, is what the gospel says. So at 3 p.m. he dies, and the two thieves beside him, one each side, they are, to make sure that they're dead, they break their legs. Now remember in another video I did, they said, the prophecy is, you should not break a bone of the lamb. So Yeshua didn't have his legs broken. Yeshua, instead, they pierced his side, and out came blood and water. Blood for the forgiveness of sins, and water resembling of washing us clean, making us clean. And so they take him down off the stake, because in Deuteronomy it tells about how if you're on a stake, that if the person was left on the stake, they would be, and over past sunset, it'd be considered accursed. And so they would take the body down. They took Yeshua's body down and buried it before sunset, and they put him in the grave. And so he was in the grave one night, one day, 2 nights, 2 days, 3 nights, 3 days. And on the third day, around 3 o'clock or so, that's when he rises from the grave. Now, in the book of John here, if we were to look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it would say that they rested on the Sabbath and they were getting ready for the Sabbath. But in the book of John, let's look what he says. John chapter 19, verse 31. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath, because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath. They asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. Okay, so it says, now was the day of preparation. Now normally Friday is known as the preparation day, because it's preparing for the Sabbath day, the Shabbat. But this is a special Sabbath. Some versions of the Bible say high Sabbath. Some of them say special Sabbath. But it says the next day was to be a special Sabbath. This is the special Sabbath, the high Sabbath. Now, in my other video, like I said, I did a video on Passover. There was day 1 and day 7 are the high Sabbath days, which you don't do any regular work, any work that you get paid for. You rest on those days. So that's what this is, the special Sabbath. So that Wednesday was a high Sabbath, or was a preparation day. Now, it says in the Gospels that the women, they bought spices for his body, and they prepared them. And then it says that they came early. Let's see. In the other Gospels, it says, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it says that they brought the spices with them. We're already in John, so we're just going to read it. It says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary of Magdala went to the tomb and saw the stone had been removed from the entrance. Now, I'm going to turn in each of these, but not just yet. Yeshua, like I already mentioned over here, he said that he had the sign of Jonah. Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 nights and 3 days. 3 days, 3 nights. So we got 1 night, 2 night, 3 night. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. If you started on Friday, it wouldn't work. That'd be 1 night, 2 days, 3 nights. Or 2 nights. Sorry. 1 night, 2 days. I can't get there because I'm doing 1, 2, 3. So 1 night, 1 day, 2 nights. If you count the sunrise, that'd be 2 days. You can't count part of a day and part of a night. You have to count the full thing as one. So it's only 1 day. 1 day Saturday. And you still don't get 3 out of either one. So there ain't no way it's going to work. Even if you counted from Thursday, if he died on Thursday, it still wouldn't work. 1 night, 2 night, and right here, no, well, 3 nights, there's 3 nights, but 1, 2, you can't count a part of a day. Because according to the Gospels, when they got there, the stone was already rolled away. So let's read in Matthew. And we'll go through Matthew, and then Mark, and then Luke, and then John. It helps to have a Hebrew understanding of God's Word. Because then you understand the morning and the evening and how they reckon the days. Genesis 1. There's evening and there's morning the first day. Okay, so Matthew chapter 28, verse 1. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. Okay, here it says at dawn on the first day. That's actually mistranslation of not understanding how the Greek and the Hebrew work. When it says dawn, there's a different Greek word that would be there if it was actually talking about the rising of the sun. So the word dawn there is actually the beginning of the first day of the week. So you'd actually read it after the Sabbath at the beginning of the first day of the week. Or in the Greek where it says day 1 of the week. So it would be after sunset. After the sun went down here, it's still dark. Just like we read in the book of John. It's still dark when Mary and Martha come to the tomb. And they come to the tomb and they see that the stone is rolled away. And that's when the angel comes and tells them. Okay? So it says, verse 2, that for there was a violent earthquake, for an angel of Yahweh came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Okay? The women weren't there when the angel scared the guards and they felt like dead men. They weren't there when the stone was rolled away, because it said when they got there, the stone had already been rolled away. Let's go to Mark, because it doesn't say that in Matthew, but the other Gospels say otherwise. Let's go to Mark. Chapter 16, verse 1. When the Sabbath was over, because it ends at sunset, Mary of Magdala, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go to anoint Yeshua's body. Very early on the first day of the week, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other. So very early on the first day of the week, that'd be pretty early, is whenever sunset is over, that becomes the first day of the week, day 1. And so that'd be very early. Very early in the first day of the week, just after sunrise. Now it says just after sunrise, but in the Greek, when you actually translate that word in the Greek, it means the goal of the sun, of the rising sun. What is the goal of the rising sun? The end result of the rising sun is at the end, that the sun sets. That's what it actually means. So it's actually bad bias translation right there, because they don't understand. Whoever translated this do not really understand the concept of Hebrew reckoning of days and how to translate that Greek word. And you would actually call that at the setting of the sun. It says, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. So like I said, it didn't say it in Matthew, but it said here in Mark, that the stone, when they got there, it was already rolled away. And it says, do not be alarmed, he said, the angel. Let's see. Okay, I skipped a verse. But then when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. This more than likely was an angel of God. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. he is not here. See the place where they laid him. So he had risen. This is past tense. He's already risen. Verse 9 says, when Yeshua rose early, okay, there's a lot in the Greek and the Hebrew, they don't really put punctuation. So these commas are put where the translators think that they should be. But when Yeshua rose early, or late, when Yeshua rose, early, that's where it should be. The comma should be when Yeshua rose. Early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary of Magdala, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. So, he appeared early on the first day of the week to her. It'd be kind of contradictory if he appeared early in the morning, like sunrise. Too many contradictions because they're not translated correctly. In Luke, chapter 24. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of Yeshua. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. Okay, so it says on the first day of the week, very early in the morning. Now, when you say night and day, a lot of times night means this evening, in the middle of the night kind of thing, but also can mean in the morning. I know our days start at midnight. At midnight tonight will be Sunday. Well, their time, a lot of times morning was even at night. Morning, it said, and morning, evening and morning were the first day. But a lot of times early in the morning can be still at night when it starts. Okay? And then we'll turn back to John now. Now we're on this day here, the 18th. So early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, because it's still dark at night when they came, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running, told the disciples, and the disciples came running too, because they were having what they call Havdalah. I forget what else they call it.
Talk about Havdalah.
Yeah. But there's another name they call it too. But they
Shabbat.
separate the day, the Shabbat, from the regular days, the other 6 days. But they were just finishing up. They're eating bread, drinking wine. They're just finishing up. And the women go to the disciples. Peter and James and John, they all come running. Peter looks in there, like, where's his body? They have taken him from the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. So, let's see, in the verse 19. I wonder if it's not mentioned. Okay, verse 19. Yeshua appears to his disciples in the evening. So it's becoming the 19th when he appears to his disciples, verse 19. It's interesting, verse 19, and it's becoming the 19th of the day of the next month, or that month. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, this is chapter 20 of John, Yeshua came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw Yeshua, when they saw him. Okay, so this is the timeline. Now, I may make another video about this, but there are pagan feasts that the Catholics celebrate. They brought it in way back in the 300s, and some of them before the 300s. Back in a man named Constantine. He was I'd say he was the founder of the Roman Catholic Church. But he was a very evil, wicked man. He worshipped the sun and the sky. And so the story goes that he saw a sign in the sky, and it said, heard a voice say, in this sign, conquer. And so he took that as a sign from God to go and conquer one of the other armies that was fighting against. And ever since then, it's been, they say he converted to Christianity. Christianity didn't exactly exist at the time. He helped form what is modern day Christianity. A different kind of Christianity than what was before his time. What he says is, if you Judaize, what he called Judaizing, if you go and do what the Jews do by resting on the Sabbath day, the seventh day of the week, or doing anything that they do, Passover, unleavened bread, Day of Trumpets, stuff like that, then you'll be killed. So he created that. So anyway, they get Good Friday because they don't understand the preparation day and the Sabbath, because they don't understand the whole, what they call Jewish things, which is not Jewish, it's God's things. That there's a preparation day called Passover, and the next day is a high Sabbath, a special Sabbath. So it's not necessarily Friday preparation day, Saturday weekly Sabbath and like it says in the book of John. And then they get Easter Sunday because they're already worshiping Easter, their Queen of Heaven. It's written about in the book of Ezekiel or Jeremiah. Jeremiah talks about the Queen of Heaven, because there's different goddesses and gods. Okay, you read about a lot of it in the Old Testament. It's known as Baal and Ashtaroth, Asherah. There's Ishtar, Astarte. You can look this up. It's common knowledge. You can look up on the internet or look up in an old encyclopedia. But if they haven't changed the history on the new encyclopedias yet, because they like to do that, change the history on things. But you'll find all these different gods and goddesses that pagans worship all came from Babylon. And that was at the time before Abraham and in Abraham's time. And so the main ones in the Bible are Baal and Asherah. But in Greek, it was known as Diana. There's Astarte. Like I said, there's different ones. You can look them up. It'll give you different symbolism. There's Isis from Egypt. But the word Easter in English is Easter. It comes from Old English, from German, Ostara, and which is a goddess, the goddess of spring. And they're also the moon goddess. They're also a bare-breasted goddess. And it's just about sex and fertility. And that's what the Easter bunny is for. All the eggs, all that stuff comes from pagan Easter worship. And they would worship on the Sunday. And for her holiday, it would always be at this time of the month, this time of the year. But they would always worship the sun. They'd face the rising of the sun. So you'd face the east, which for us here is that direction. They'd face the east and watch the sun rise. And that's where early morning Easter sunrise service came from. They'd watch the rising of the sun, well, that came from the pagan worship. And that's mentioned in the Bible. All these different pagan holidays mentioned in the Bible. Christmas is mentioned in the Bible. It's just not known as Christmas. But it would be called the Feast of Tammuz. They'd face the north and they'd cry out to Tammuz in the north. Yahweh's temple, his throne is not in the east like the Easter is. His throne is in the west. You've got to come in through the eastern gate and you've got to bow to him in the west. That way your back is to those other gods. And you're making a mockery of them. So that's where the Easter comes in. And so the Catholics, they start their Easter holiday with Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. They go out and they party hard. They party hard and they drink and do all kind of lasciviousness.
Lasciviousness.
Thank you, lasciviousness, which is a great sin. And then Wednesday, the next day, they go and they get a cross ash on their forehead. And then they have 40 days of Lent. So the Ash Wednesday is for repentance. And they have 40 days of Lent. It leads up to Easter, Good Friday. It leads up to Good Friday, and then they have Easter Sunday. And some places, I think it's Eastern Orthodox, says Easter Monday. Because they have day 1, or night 1, night 2, night 3, day 1, day 2, and they believe early in the morning would be day 3 for rising of the sun, rising of Jesus out of the grave. But I mean, they're at least they're closer. If you died on Friday, he would have risen on Monday morning. He would have risen on Monday morning because 3 days and 3 nights later wouldn't give you Sunday; it'd give you Monday afternoon if you died on Friday. So this is the Crucifixion week of Yeshua. And I hope that it helped you to understand how the week actually went. No Palm Sunday, Good Friday, Easter sunrise. It's just not possible. I hope that, and I pray that this blesses you.